oddly, the screen went black while I was talking to you about the place of noises. I guess Moodus didn't want me to reveal her secrets. So let's try this again. So the place of noises is called that here in Moodus because of the sounds that the earth herself makes that have been a mystery to natives and settlers for centuries. In the 1600s and 1700s, the noises were so prevalent when the English settlers first arrived that they likened them to that of a cannon. And they said that it was enough to shake the houses and destroy the houses. They couldn't sort out why this was happening. But then they talked to the natives who had resided there, who had long known that the earth had made noises in this region, but had also noticed they had increased. And the natives had told them, the reason your houses are shaking is because our gods are not happy with your new god. And they felt that the two groups coming together was not good for this little area of East Haddam. Of course, the English took this to mean that the devil herself was in the ground and had to be removed. And if you've been to East Haddam, you may have heard of Devil's Hop Yard. And if you've been in Connecticut, you may have gone to over 40 places named after the devil because the early settlers were certain that the devil was everywhere here. But here in Moodus, the devil was in the dirt, the earth, apparently turning off our live streams. So what does one do when encountered with such a problem? Well, you try to solicit some help. And there was a doctor that had heard about these noises and was visiting through Connecticut when the townsfolk approached him and he said, I am not just a doctor, but I know magic, and I can rid you of the noises. So the doctor took himself upon a hill in town, and it was also a blacksmith's shop. And in the blacksmith's shop, he said he would work day and night to get down into the earth, because what was in the earth was what one could only call a carbuncle. And it was the carbuncle that was causing the Moodus noises. And once that was removed from the earth, the houses would stop shaking and the earth would stop moving. For days and nights, no one saw the now blacksmith that became a hermit in town trying to get the carbuncle, as he called it. But then they became suspicious because doctors were on the lookout for the carbuncle. The carbuncle provided immunities, or so it was told. All of a sudden, the doctor was gone with a great hole in the earth, and they guessed that he had indeed gotten the carbuncle. And the noises lessened. Now, there are songs that have been written about this particular event, and there's a song called The Ballad of Machimoodus, and I will try to read this to you as much as possible. I will read to you at the very least the first stanza. I'm going to lean into the fire and look crazy here. See you upon the lovely moor, a crazy building rise. No hand dares venture to open the door. No footstep treads. That gives you an idea of how scared they were of the man looking for the carbuncle. I will post the full poem in the comments after. So why did I tell you the story of Machimoodus before I told you something truly frightening? Because I do believe that the areas in which we are dictate how things go. And I believe, truly, that there's magic in the land. And yes, there are earthquakes that have been found, small ones, tremors here in this part of Connecticut, but why? Maybe it is a land of magic. Maybe there was something in the earth. I'm not sure the devil walked here, but I do think there's something that makes this an area that is actually supernatural. So with that, I want to tell you a bit more. Connecticut has been the site of not just stories about noises or stories about ghosts, of which we have many, and of which many of us have even our own personal encounters, but stories of creatures, half-human creatures, other sorts of beings as well. But one creature we're all familiar with because of films and TV shows and the like are vampires. And not a lot of people realize that vampire legends started here in Connecticut and in Rhode Island. I'm just moving a bit from the smoke, but hopefully you guys can still see me all right. Now, it's arguable which had a vampire first, but I'm going to walk you through the storylines and let you make your own determination. So one of the stories that first came of vampires was in Warwick, Rhode Island. But there was another story that came at a similar time in Jewett City, Connecticut. But then both stories traced back to earlier stories. And the Jewett City one traced back to a time before the American Revolution. And it was a time when in eastern Connecticut there was a disease that was quite prevalent. It was prevalent throughout New England. And that disease was known as consumption. We don't hear that word today. What we do hear is tuberculosis. And this was indeed tuberculosis, and there was indeed no cure. And it was deadly for many who had this disease. But in the 1700s, people started having these terrible episodes with consumption. And enormous families were starting to become affected. There was a farmer in Connecticut and in Rhode Island. The one in Rhode Island was one of 14 children. And he too had 14 children. And it was said that he and his wife were as fertile as the land. So they were great farmers and also reproduced in great quantity. The problem was, for this dear farmer, he had a terrible dream one night. And in the terrible dream, it was that half his farms were destroyed, half his crops never grew. He woke up the next day and told his wife about the terrible dream and begged her to tell him that it was just something of his imagination, and she told him as such. But then shortly thereafter, one of their children became gravely ill and passed away in a matter of weeks. Then another child did, and then another, until precisely 7 of his children passed.